Welcome back, everyone, to OpenLine. We have this Stacy Rector, Executive Director of Tennesseans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, talking about the death penalty here in Tennessee, as Tennessee is set to execute someone tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. A bunch of calls here, so let's go to the phones. Let's go to Steve. Hello, Steve.
Yes, sir.
Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
And you know what? It's such a great discussion, and I appreciate. I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek. The lady on the TV. I appreciate her brilliance on this subject, and not just there's a theological approach to it, a practical approach, a logical approach. And I'm the same way. I'm a theological major and a graduate from Bible college, etc. And it's been a quandary for me as well, to be honest with you. I'm a mercy guy, and I believe in the mercy of God, and I think also in the mercy of men. And I think what she says is exactly true, and that is that if you have a pure system with a judge making a righteous decision based on indisputable facts, a person committing a crime, especially a heinous crime, horrendous crime, and it would really be that pure. You have the witnesses. Even the Bible says you have to have 2 or 3 witnesses. Mm-hmm. You can't just have one person to witness against another. There's a hermeneutical law involved that. So I think if it was a pure system, then the death penalty, as it was in the Old Testament, and no doubt, there's examples in the New Testament, except Jesus was not part of that, to where it might be legitimate, like this young man who just committed 8 murders and beat and stabbed these people to death, including his own parent. And Sumner County. That was horrible. Right? I mean, when I look at that, the first thing I said, I'm going to be honest with you, first thing I said was, this guy has to fry. I mean, that's my nature. This guy has to go, right? This is ridiculous. It's heinous, blah, blah, blah. But at the same time, I think we have to look at the fact that you're right. What kind of attorneys do you have? Can you lawyer up? Are all the facts in? Can they prove beyond a reasonable doubt? What county are you in? What state are you in? I think it's a great discussion, and I don't have the answer. I really don't have the answer.
Well, Steve, thank you. Really quickly, what else?
Real quick, I do think to make someone wait 30 years and then kill them is unreasonable. So,
okay.
I just think that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Johnson was convicted for a murder in 1984. It seems like many of the people that we're seeing executed in Tennessee right now committed their crimes in the 80s. And what stands out to you when you hear that they were convicted in the 80s, all those years ago? What about the system was happening then?
Well, and I think this again goes to that issue of arbitrariness. At that time, Tennessee did not have a 51-year life sentence. It was less. So there was more concern about people able to parole out at some point. And we did not have the sentence of life without parole. And so juries were then faced at that time with a life sentence that was 30 years-ish. I'm not 100% clear on that. And death. Those were the options. And so you saw back in November when Edmund Zagorski was executed here that 6 of the jurors on his original jury came out in support of clemency because they said, we didn't have life without parole. We didn't have that option. We didn't want him to be executed, but we didn't want him to get out of prison. There is now another way. And so I think, again, these are individuals that, were they tried today, there could have been a different outcome simply based on their timing, which again goes to this system's arbitrariness.
Let's go to Molly. Hello, Molly.
Yes.
Go right ahead. What's on your mind?
Hi, thank you so much for taking my call. I was calling just to say how much I've enjoyed the conversation tonight, and to say that as a Christian in my own journey with the death penalty, it was something that I had come to realize that I don't support it. And at the beginning of when I began contemplating this issue, I thought that I did support it. And I've since decided that I do not, because I just do not see Jesus going in and inserting a needle into someone's arm. And that's the bottom line for me as far as my Christian reasoning for this. But one thing I'd like to ask Stacy, in reference to some of the callers that have called this evening, when you look at the death penalty as a deterrent for the crime, is there any evidence when you look around the world at other countries that there is a way that you would like to see our system reform to a model in one country, in some country around the world?
Okay, thank you.
And so I'm just wondering if there's a country that Stacy sees that she would say, yes, Denmark has a system that works, or is there one, since we're looking for alternatives, how she might answer that question?
That's a great two-part question. One is the deterrence issue, which the reality is that the research just does not support one way or the other deterrence, and mostly because you've got such a small sample and so many other factors that play in. How do you determine that? But what we do know anecdotally is that states without the death penalty in this country often have lower murder rates than states with the death penalty. So there is anecdotal evidence that there's absolutely no correlation, although the research is just, it's kind of a wash, if you will. As far as other nations, we're the only Western industrialized nation that still has the death penalty. And we keep company with China and Saudi Arabia and North Korea. There's a few others in there that I'm missing, but so the European Union doesn't allow membership, in my understanding, if you have the death penalty. So there are models. I can't name one off the top of my head. I'd have to do more research. But I think the United States is not keeping very good company when it comes to this issue.
Let's take David really quickly here. We actually have two Davids. So, David?
David, yes.
Go right ahead. Yes, sir.
I just wanted to know if there were any personal experiences in your life that where there was a death or a murder or a rape, because I'm a combat veteran, and when I went to the VA clinic, I asked for a combat veteran psychiatrist, and they didn't have one. They don't have one. So I talked to a 37-year-old boy that wanted to help me, and I said, how can you help me if you've never been there? You can go to all the movies you want to go to. You can read all the books you want to read. But if you've not been there, if you don't know what fear does to a person, you really, it's really, really hard to convey or help that person. That's the problem with a lot of veterans today, because they're trying to treat them out of a book, or they're trying to treat them out of.
I think you bring up a great point. I'm gonna ask that. I mean, I think what he's saying is, do you have, has someone in your family been killed or raped or? It's one thing to say I'm opposed to the death penalty. It's another thing if you've been affected, if you've had a family member that you've had this happen to. It's easier to say, oh, I'm opposed to the death penalty. But then when this happens, how do you feel then? And so, what about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's a fair question. And I, honestly, I have not had that experience. I hope I never do. I hope nobody in my family ever does. It is beyond my comprehension at the suffering that people endure. What I would say to that is that's why it's so important for our organization to make sure those voices are represented, to make sure that we have murder victims' family members who have lost a parent, a child, a sibling, speaking about their experience and why the death penalty does not address their needs. It's why we want to have those who've been wrongfully convicted and who came near to being executed before they were finally released after their innocence came to light. Why we have those people talking about their experience with the death penalty and how 23 years of their life was taken in prison, and then their life was almost taken by the death penalty for something they didn't do. Correctional officers who are asked, as Molly, the caller, talked about putting the needle in the arm. We ask our state employees to do this as part of their job. And what does that do to a person? What does that do to a person who is just trying to do their job? And so these are just some of the voices, because I think he's right. You have to be able to hear from those directly impacted. And though I haven't been in that way, I try very hard to make sure that those people's voices are heard whenever we go out to talk about this issue, because it is so important.
All right, we're going to take a break. If you're on the line, hold on. Take a break. We'll be back right after this.